Welcome to Steam-Powered Scoundrels, a Malifaux podcast, episode 72. Welcome to Malifaux.
And then we'll get sidetracked with a topic of conversation, and then someone will say something out of pocket that would be great out of context, and that's when we introduce the episode. One sec. Wife's coming down the stairs. She is working from home today. Yeah, wave, say hi. You're not on camera. There you go. That's Victoria. All right. Introductions. Welcome back to Steam-Powered Scoundrels. I am your host, Douglas Scoundrels, and today are no one you're familiar with at all whatsoever. This episode, we are talking to a bunch of people that are willing to give me the time to talk about Malifaux to try to sell them on it, I guess, or it could be out of pity. I don't really care. I will jump at any excuse I can to talk about this game. So let's go in a counterclockwise fashion, and as I see it, Mr. Let's Geek It Out, can you give us a brief explanation as to who you are?
Hey, so I'm Seb, or I'm on TikTok or YouTube. Let's Geek It Out. I'm from the UK. I'm very into tabletop gaming, video gaming, and stuff like that. I very recently got into tabletop gaming, and I'm kind of just here to learn more about another game system, to add something else to my arsenal. So yeah, that's me.
Excited. You said you knew absolutely nothing about Malifaux, right?
No, I've researched it for about 10-15 minutes before now, and I've got a basic idea of what happens, set before the game, but that's it. So I'm excited to learn everything.
All right, I'm too excited. Chad, our one American here, I guess. Well, I'm American too. What am I saying?
Yeah, I'm Chad on TikTok, Chad Paints and Plays, same on Instagram. I've been, playing word games for about 10-15 years. I took about a 10-year break, though, so there's a lot of stuff I'm kind of out on. And Malifaux, I played first edition back when it first came out, and ran some Outcasts, a little Bayou, and I'm excited to kind of hear what's changed and what it's like getting back into it.
Okay, and our last guest, Mr. When I Can Hobby.
Hello, so yeah, I'm Steve from When I Can Hobby, TikTok, Instagram, and starting a YouTube channel as well. I am a returning hobbyist, a bit like Chad. Been out of it a few years, come back into it in the last year or so. And yeah, just playing war games and wargaming and miniature painting. First found Malifaux myself, going back, I was going to say 10 years or so, when I first discovered it. When I was looking at Skirmish Gaming, it was one of the only Skirmish games as well as Infinity that was out there at the time. Very interested in it then, but didn't pick it up. It was life, and very interested in getting back into it, and potentially getting back into it down here. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to this, understanding more about it. I think I'm looking forward to having a chat with someone who knows the game, as opposed to someone in the shop who's like, yeah, it's some weird Victorian stuff to do.
Okay, well, I might as well go over my resume and humble brag myself, or tell on myself, depending on how much you consider this to be a life worth living. I'm Doug Roman. I have formally changed my name to Douglas Scoundrels, specifically on Facebook, for reasons of the fact that, despite it being a relatively small community compared to Warhammer, I have almost the exact same name of someone else, and he has gotten my mail before. So, it's now Douglas Scoundrels. I have been podcasting for 8 years now, only about Malifaux for this entire time, and I've been playing for about 9, almost 10 years. So I've been around for a bit. Had been the show running for that long. Had a bit of a hiatus at one point, but I do multiple formats. This is sort of the generic one that we talk about anything on, Steam-Powered Scoundrels. You probably listened to Friday Night Fodown, Steve, if you said you were checking me out at one point.
I have, yeah, so I was dipping into it.
Okay.
To be fair, I was really enjoying it, but then you guys were talking about Malifaux, and I was like, there's a joke in this, everyone's laughing, but I don't get it. I want to know it.
Okay, Friday Night Fodown is basically, we have just a giant pile of dumb questions that usually involve short answers. We just go around the table, someone picks a question, everyone else has to answer it within the best of their abilities. It's very silly. Most of the time we've had a few drinks at the very least, very chummy friendly stuff. And then the other format, two formats that show up sometimes, one's called Best Laid Plans, where we actually go through an entire game and discuss our ideas and thoughts and why we made certain decisions in between the rounds, as opposed to like before it or after or before and after. And last is Malifaux Port Authority, which is spearheaded by my wife, and that is literally just talking about shipping the characters of Malifaux and other relationship-related stuff. That's the podcast. Besides that, do volunteering at Gen Con. I've created a couple new game types for the game, one of which eventually became official, which is just like a party game. Think Super Smash Brothers with an emphasis on items. So pretty much all of my free time that isn't devoted to my family is devoted to this game. I'm a bit of a nerd. Anyways, that's who I am. So we can go into discussing actual Malifaux now. I have some show notes to hopefully keep me on track. I'm not sure how well that's going to go, but since I am first and foremost a lore person, I consider that to be my strongest suit, although I know every aspect of the game fairly well. We'll talk about lore first, because that's what got me into the game. Well, technically, actually, my wife got me into the game, but that's because of the lore. The lore is a play on our actual history. Think normal human history, with the exception of magic is real, and everyone's version of magic is real. So every culture's idea of what magic is as valid as everyone else's. It's not strictly like your wizardry, Harry Potter type stuff, or voodoo or Romani, stuff like that. All of it counts and all of it's just as equal. So going through normal history, and then at some point magic starts dwindling. Like, you can't do as strong of spells as you used to. You're going to start needing little blue pills to sort of, get your staff up. And, people start realizing, oh, this is bad because magic good. People like magic for the most part. It does good stuff. So eventually, like, the remaining wizards that can still perform magic get together at, for some reason, Santa Fe, New Mexico, and they say, hey, we're going to do this ritual to save the magic. We're going to bring magic back. Make magic great again, if you will. But instead, they rip a hole in space-time and just about kill every single one of them, which is not good. However, this hole, they find out, transports them to another world, which is now titular Malifaux. It's almost exactly like Earth, as far as they can tell, with a couple exceptions, like there's 2 moons. And the other big exception is that magic is very easy to cast here. So hooray. So they start exploring, they find this abandoned city in the middle of nowhere, they colonize it, they start researching the people that used to live there, this ancient civilization. It's sort of a Renaissance thing where they're making these discoveries and converting them into technologies and magical stuff, as well as them finding this resource called Soulstone. This is the game's MacGuffin. Soulstone is effectively a magic battery. You use it to cast magic. On Malifaux, you use it to make your magic more powerful. Earthside, it allows you to cast magic when you couldn't before. So suddenly the most important resource mankind knows about. So they start shipping it out. And after a while, things start going bad. Suddenly there's a big blizzard and all this kind of disastrous stuff happens. And suddenly the portal closes. Oh no. And this is around late 1700s. People panic. Immediately, there's wars that happen all across the globe. Effectively, the Napoleonic Wars is the best way I can describe it, but a little bit more global than that. And the winner that comes out of this is a group called the Guild of Mercantilers. So not even a country sort of wins these resource wars, but an organization. Think East India Company, but even more evil. And so they kind of keep the peace, as it were, for the rest of 100 years, and like almost to the day, 100 years after the portal closes, it opens back up again for no understandable reason. The guild freaks out, sends in an army. There's nothing there to fight. There's no evidence of the people that used to live there 100 years ago. Big, spooky, scary stuff. So this time, instead of sending like the best and brightest, the scientists, the artists, over to Malifaux to, have another sort of Renaissance thing, we're going to just turn it into Australia and send all of our criminals and undesirables, and we're going to force them to mine the Soulstone for us. Real nice. And that is effectively where the game starts, Malifaux First Edition. And there's a story that happens after that. One sec, I'm talking too much. But yeah, that's the long version of the backstory. Second breach. The tyrants, something I will reference a lot because they're so integral to the story, is the tyrants. Your average layman in Malifaux doesn't understand or know who they are, but obviously us observing, think of them like slightly less powerful chaos gods. They were really, really powerful magicians from actual Malifaux, which, has its own people, has its own culture. Vaguely humanoid, but more mythological creatures, kind of a mix. Like, there's the Fae, there's giants, there's sirens, all these ancient races that are now dead or going extinct. But the tyrants were some of these...
They're on Malifaux. Are they on Malifaux? Those, the tyrants, or are they entities, are they?
Yes, they're from Malifaux.
Okay, cool. Sorry.
They were just people that got so good at magic that they became dangerous. And I guess the qualifier for what someone becomes a tyrant is the ability to create life. That doesn't really matter. It's more of a propaganda label anyways. These are the people that more or less destroyed Malifaux, and that's why when humans eventually came to Malifaux, they didn't find any civilization, because it'd kind of been destroyed. These are 13 bad guys, and they're usually the ones that are causing all the problems in the story. You can play as a couple of them in the game, but at this point, most of them have had their bodies destroyed, so they're just sort of like powerful spirits, and they can very easily latch on to people and make them do what they want, which is sort of why the native denizens really, really hate humans.
Nice.
I've been rambling for a while. Quick rundown of the story since first edition. Stuff happens. One of the tyrants fuses with the Governor General, which is sort of like the president that runs Malifaux for the guild, because he was attempting to become a tyrant himself. Real nice guy. Went by the name of Herbert Kitchener, which is an actual real-world historical bastard. Look him up sometime. But eventually his ritual goes awry and he accidentally fuses with one of these tyrants, and now he's just causing cults to crop up in Malifaux and Urside at the same time. Just explaining the story from the outset is actually not the best way to convey what's going on to you folks. Never mind, ignore all what I just said. Except for the thing about Herbert Kitchener, fuck that guy. Okay, that's the rundown of the lore, aesthetics. So when you talk to someone about Malifaux, they'll probably say it's something like cowboys and Victorian stuff. And yes, that is true. We have a good chunk of that. But they borrow aesthetical themes from just about anything that existed roughly around this time, going as far back as like 1870s as some of the fashion choices there are amongst these people. And then as far forward as one of the keywords, one of the aesthetics in the game is very diesel punk, which is World War I, but that's as far futuristic as they get, with the exception of a couple kits where they just kind of go a little nuts with the theming. But we've got Ghost Rider cowboys, we've got yellow journalists, we've got zombies, we've got Victorian horror, which includes Jack the Ripper and Frankenstein. We've got unions, which is a big thing. That's my favorite keyword. We've got the Neverborn, which is just a whole bunch of monstrous people that are native denizens, which include nightmare creatures, the Nephilim, which kind of look like demons. Depression ghosts, which feed off of your sadness or other emotions.
Yeah, no, I'll be honest with you. All of the way that they look and everything is probably one of the most coolest things on the outside looking into this game. Like, I find that the most interesting, because steampunk, diesel punk, like you said, Victorian, all of that, I think it looks awesome. And having looked recently at the models again, they're looking better and better every time. So it's definitely something that I find interesting about it, because there's no other game that does that per se. You got like the Wild West games and stuff like that, but nothing playing with the steampunk or the punk stuff as this is played with. So I like it. So that's
I think that's what interested me as well, to be fair. Because if I go on, I go onto a website and look at the models. First thing I just skim through. I go Half Bloods. They look awesome. That's probably what I'd end up playing. And I think you look at them and go, the models just look awesome, and they're just so varied. Like, you've got one creature that looks like he's the guy from World of Warcraft Burning Crusade with like the horns, and then you've got these cool looking like vampires. There's just such a great variation in one box of models.
The The running joke is that there are no vampires in Malifaux, but there are vampires in Malifaux. Just not your typical like Count Dracula.
Yeah.
There is one dude that is from the Neverborn faction that actually feasts on the blood of his own kind.
Wow. Okay.
But not humans. There's also a Southeast Asian vampire called Penanggalan. Which is a lady who apparently like detaches her head from her body, and then her organs come with. And
Wow.
it's I'll just look it up sometime.
Yeah, for sure.
But there's a lot of references to actual mythology and legend stuff throughout the world. But yeah, the aesthetics, and there's actually a reason why the aesthetics vary so much, and that was because Weird was originally just a minis company. They didn't make a game. And then at one point they decided, hey, we're going to make a game, but we're going to make it so that everything we've created can be played in this game. So they initially had to jam together a bunch of stuff that didn't quite go together, and they actually made it work, which I'm still really surprised it worked out so well. But they've kept that theme throughout this first, second, third edition.
I love some of the
Nice.
seriousness of like some of the way the factions look, like the models like Perdita and the kind of Dead West kind of stuff, and some of the nightmares. And then you can go over to the bayou and you have just the most ridiculous moon shining, toothless gremlins and goblins just riding pigs and snails and everything else. I love that they can have an entire line of stuff that's just totally. It's just such a smart way to run a miniatures company and just make sure everything you have can fit in there.
It's like there's something for everyone, isn't it? Like no matter what you're into, there will be a team or a side for you if you just look into it.
And you can also pick by playstyles. The way the game is so complex that you'll be able to find something you want if you don't particularly have an aesthetics in mind. But yes, the Bayou, our version of orcs, I feel like any good game needs some kind of silly faction or keyword or warband or whatever just to be goofy. Our version of orcs are hillbillies, mixed with a little bit of Cajun flair. Their things are booze, boomsticks, and big hats. Their shtick is the person with the biggest hat is the leader.
That makes sense.
It's just, very, very orky coded. But we can go and get into the factions once I get done these other bullet points I have for aesthetics, magics and soul stones and all that other stuff. Wanted to put this here more than anything. Magic, and this is me pulling from the RPG. A lot of the world building is done in the RPG books. Because most of the time the actual story lore stuff comes out once a year in one book. So their magic is sort of built around 4 different colleges of magic, if you will, and those are actually associated with the 4 suits of the deck of cards, which in turn are sort of define certain skills and abilities you have in the game, which require those specific suits. Along the same lines, in the universe, in the universe explanation, sort of superhuman abilities is that in Malifaux, if you are really good at something, you will become supernaturally good at something. So they have the built-in reason for why you can do kind of strangely powerful or slightly inexplicable things in the game that don't really work in real life. Instead of this just being hand-waving of like, it just works that way, is like, no, she's so good at insulting people that she can pull anyone in to attack her, even if it's a mindless robot.
That's cool.
Stuff like that.
I like that.
Okay, that's the magic. And the other thing, I'm really proud of this game as far as to go with representation. You will get a lot of different races and genders in the game, and they're still improving on certain things as well. Like we're getting our first canonically gay couple coming out this year. Which I'm really proud of. There are plenty of people where if you read into it even a little bit, you're like, oh yeah, no, they're very gay. And to be fair, we don't know the canonical sexuality of most of the people in the game, but it's still really, really nice to see them do that, especially since I've been yelling at them for years to do it. I'll take credit for that. No one can stop me. Okay, the factions. The game is played by you selecting a faction and then being able to build your crew, party, warband, whatever from that faction. In tournaments, you almost always declare a faction, and that's who you can pull from for each of your games. The factions are as follows. The Guild, which is in the Guild of Mercantilers. You are playing the government. good for you. The Resurrectionists, which are necromancers, or people that use necromancy, because it's not just zombies, and there's like a cult. There's a nice cinnamon roll of a lady that sort of collects all the abandoned zombies and has a parade with them and stuff. But they're probably the closest thing to like the evil faction in the game. There are the Arcanists, which is my main faction. They are the working class people and the magic users who are very, very oppressed by the government. They want to keep a tight control on magic, so anyone that isn't like registered or working for them is a danger to everyone. So they've banded together to protect themselves and their ilk. Then there is the Neverborn, which is the native denizens. They don't like people because people show up and suddenly the tyrants start gaining more power and becoming more dangerous. Also, they're just invading and taking their stuff. Reason to be very upset. But as mentioned before, they're like demons, there's nightmare creatures, ghosts, there's a swamp hag that's a combination of Baba Yaga and voodoo, including a chicken-legged hut. Giants, mimics are a thing. The Fae, why did I forget the Fae? In this version, our Fae are undead, weirdly enough. Which is odd, considering they're definitely not portrayed that way in most media, but in this case, the Queen of the Fae kind of died, and everyone in her court kind of died with her, and then she got resurrected, so zombies. Those are our first initial 4 factions, and they are the suits of the cards as well. Fun fact. What was up? What's up, Steve?
Oh no, I said, and that's that. So, because there's still another 4 factions, isn't there, on top of it? But sorry, I'll let you go. I've been I've been on the website. You can go along, clicking on each one, looking at all of the models.
Mm-hmm. Oh goodness, website will give you a good idea of the keywords you're looking at, because while the factions do sort of have themes and do sort of have aesthetics, it is mostly tied down to the keywords. Each faction has 9 keywords, and that's sort of how you hire your crew, with the exception of you can pull in stuff that is still in the faction, you just have to pay a tax on it. So our first 4 main factions, then our 5th one is the Outcasts, and that's all Chad probably remembers from first edition, because there are only 5 factions. The Outcast is just kind of the me first faction. It's everyone that doesn't play well with anyone else slapped together, and weirdly enough, one of their own is causing the most problems for them in the lore, which I find absolutely hilarious. So that's actually possibly has more cowboy-esque-ness to it. You've got the diesel punk guy named Von Schill, who is based on a real person. He's Prussian, not German. Don't go down that route. You got the Victorias, which are a set of sword-wielding twins. One of them is a mimic. You'll never know which one. You have your classic bandit, train robber guy. Hamelin, which is a tyrant, the aforementioned bad guy. He likes rats. If you've ever heard the story of the Pied Piper, that takes place in the town of Hamelin. Small lore nugget, I guess. Jackdaw, which he's the embodiment of injustice. So his dudes are people that have been unjustly killed, and he just goes around and ruins things for everyone else. Tara's also an undead cowboy, and she's got timey shit. But anyways, that's the Outcast. I don't have to go through all of them. Then the Bayou, which is... It might have come in first. I'm not sure. I started in second edition, early second edition. But the Bayou was originally called Gremlins. Now they're called the Bayou. They are little green dudes, very silly for the most part. Don't really have a lot of relevance to the lore. But if you're playing them, you enjoy goofy silliness. Besides gun and beer, there's the Booze Pope, the Brewmaster. If you want to play drunken kung fu folks, there is a swineherd named Ulix, which is actually a pretty deep Odysseus reference from the Odyssey. Weirdly enough, I like saying weirdly enough. I'm saying that too much. You have the Baba Yaga Swamp Witch lady in here as well. That's something you'll notice, is that every faction has a couple of people that are in multiple factions. There's a lot of changing of allegiances and hidden allegiances going on in this game. As well as that, there's one lady who's just effectively completely copying someone from the guild faction, Perdita specifically. And then there's just a good old bastard of a guy called Summerteeth Jones, who's just the typical self-centered, selfish, give me everything sort of goblin man. After that is the Ten Thunders, which is our East Asian faction. Effectively, they are a sort of mafia-esque crime syndicate. However, the majority of what they're doing is to undermine or take control away from the guild, who is currently oppressing them Earthside. They represent what's called the Three Kingdoms, which is effectively Japan and China and keep wanting to say Korea, Vietnam. And around this time, I want to say it's the Boxer Rebellion is going on, which is sort of playing historically in Malifaux, or Earthside's version, Malifaux's version of Earth. Blah. But they also have a decent amount of non-Asian themes as well, because some of their folks are just spies that are spying on other factions. And then our newest faction is the Explorer Society, and this is literally just the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Not like a one-to-one copy, but that was their obvious stated influence of the faction. So you've got like a big game hunter, you've got a science lady who's got a big boat, you've got a capitalist who runs all the trains, a hive mind that infects people, which is definitely a good thing. Stuff like that. I think I can stop talking about factions now.
So within those factions, where I remember in first, and I don't remember if they were all part of Outcast, but there was like the bounty hunters and things like that, and like the mercenaries, like Von Krieg, right? Was that his name? Is that correct?
Von Schell.
Von Schill. Okay, so Von Schill's kind of like become a head boss of his own faction now, because I remember he used to be kind of like a supplemental, almost like a side mercenary guy.
Yeah, he's arguably the most stable out of all of them, so he's trying to sort of put them together under his banner, especially since mercenaries have become illegal in Malifaux City for lore reasons, so he's trying to corral them, which isn't going all that well, but most of the mercenaries you remember are now in the mercenary keyword, which is run by the Victorias. Okay, those are the factions. But again, a lot of that's going to come down to who you like the look of as far as in those keywords. It's just a general idea of what brings them together. It's very loose. The game does not has this as a good reason why you might fight the same faction in a game or a tournament. It's like they are only loosely related and there's a decent amount of infighting, so it makes sense that eventually stuff might come to blows. Who knows?
So I was saying it's not uncommon to fight between themselves. It's like it's like 40k, like having Space Marines fight Space Marines is a bit like, wouldn't really happen, but in this I take it's a lot more like, it's a bit more fluid.
Like the best example, going back to Hamlin again, that jerk, he tried to take over the sort of city that the mercenaries were building, and so he came to blows with Von Schill and eventually Terra, who's the time lady. But the story has this wonderful out of context artwork where you see the old man mercenary dude beating the hell out of a bunch of children.
Fair enough.
I'm sold.
Yeah, I remember. I have it in a box somewhere, but I've got like the first edition, like Hamlin set, and I remember the big thing was, I need to buy more rats and I need to buy more kids because it's all about like rodent and child violence is like his entire kind of thing.
I actually have that entire keyword. Someone donated it for the charity of that.
Child violence. That's
That's it.
Kind of see it.
I mean, it's Star Wars is based on it, so...
yeah, true.
So our
True,
man Hamlin, and there were 12 rats in this box. Most of the time you can only field 3 of the same thing if you can field multiple of all, so that's kind of explains his playstyle, just floating the field with cheap chaff. We got a Rat King, which is
nice.
Something. Dead dog, the worst used car salesman you've ever seen. Yeah, rats. And then in the most recent one, it sort of fades to black. He starts a fight with yet another person from the Outcast faction. So Hamlin sucks. Okay, so as far as like picking stuff that you like, they have got the website up there, and they'll pretty easy to Google it. It's Weird Games, WYRD -GAMES. Or you can just Google, like, pick a master in Malifaux, and it will show you the 8 factions. Goodness, 4. They're also color-coded, so they've been trying to make things less reliant on the English language. So red, green, blue, purple, yellow, brown, orange, and teal are the factions in that order. And they have their own logo as well, but the artwork of the boxes follows that same coloration. So this is the Resurrectionist faction, and the background is green. That's the Guild. That's not really lore, that's more buying stuff. I just ran into my own desk. But not knowing lore, I don't think there's probably going to be a ton of questions you have for lore, unless it's like what other historical stuff exists in the game, or what's going on Earthside.
I mean, what is going on Earthside? I mean, because obviously, like, they've sent everyone back out. So my brief recap, so I know I answered it. Went to Malifaux, then they came away from it. It's shut. Then it reopened again. Everyone was dead in Malifaux, and now they're going over to go mining it. Basically, in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
So what is everyone doing on Earth in this? Because obviously they're all going over there, and I assume they're fighting over what they're finding. And what's everyone doing on Earth?
Okay, back to Malifaux real quick. It's these are organizations, but they can't like be in open conflict with each other. So you can sort of explain the game of Malifaux to be kind of like gang fights, magical gang fights, if you will. But the guild is primarily trying to get soul stones to Earthside to gain more power for the guild. The Arcanists are trying to gain freedom for their people and also undermine the guild. They're smuggling soul stones to Earth. Neverborn want people out. The Resurrectionists, just like zombies, outcasts are trying to make a buck. Bayou are just getting blitzed and having fun. Ten Thunders also trying to gain power and undermine the guild. And the Explorer Society just wants to collect powerful stuff and be rich. But Earthside, bad things are happening. The guild used to be located in England. I think the reason for that being is that they're sort of based off the East India Company, and also Malifaux City itself is more modeled around Victorian London, whereas everything around it is more Wild West, although they've got other biomes besides like desert. But since this is past the turn of the century, we're getting close to 1910, the bad guy is moving towards more Central Europe, so the guild has actually moved to Vienna. No reference to historical events for that. But the aforementioned Herbert Kinchener fusing with one of those demigods and turning into this thing that's creating cults, those cults are now like causing wars. And so they actually have an army-sized game called The Other Side, where you can, right now they have 5 armies out, 5 different factions, and they've got a 6th on the way. One of them being effectively the British Empire called the King's Empire. The cults that I mentioned before, they're called Cult of the Burning Man. There are sea creatures very, very much similar to Tyranids, called the Gibbering Hordes, and then there is the highly technologically advanced African nation of Abyssinia. And we just got East Asian demons as another army. So yeah, wars are going on right now on their side. So it actually sucks as much over there as it does in Malifaux. Everything sucks for everyone.
So the other side, does that share a model range then, or can they kind of go back and forth, or do they have their own model?
There are a couple crossover models, but since it's an army-sized game, there's more repetitive sculpts, and everyone's supposed to kind of look similar because, again, army, uniform, all that other stuff. But there's like John Watson, that John Watson,
Yeah.
Sherlock Holmes John Watson is a model that can be in both The Other Side and Malifaux. As well as one of the masters in Malifaux is an optional officer-type character in The Other Side. 2 of them, actually. One from the Guild, one from the Resurrectionists. And I think there are a couple other models that are crossovers.
I really like the Resurrectionists. Their models look really cool, and I'm on the website as well. Just the whole concept of it's just a mix of necromancers, grave robbers, and killers. That's just like a mix that is going to essentially unleash hell on the guild, and their models as well look really cool, and they're more sort of Victorian-y, aren't they? Out of all of the ranges, they're the ones you look at going, yeah, they look more like they're in that Victorian era, and then you've obviously got the like sort of zombie-esque creatures and Frankensteins and stuff like that, which is really cool.
You just like anything dead.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my arm is flesh eater quartz in Age of Sigmar, so yeah, absolutely. Anything that's dead and gribbly.
Well, they treat necromancy not as like a black and white evil, although it trends towards that, because most of the time the necromancers gain their power from something called the Whisper, which is the embodiment of death that was sort of accidentally leaked into Malifaux a long time ago. So, long story short, a lot of these necromancers are going insane. However, there are good, or at least neutral people in the faction, as well as some necromancers existing outside of the Resurrectionist faction. Top person for good people is Molly Squidpidge. She was the one that's just collecting the abandoned zombies. Just enjoys having fun and being a ghostwriter. Whereas like someone who's outside of the faction was the Terra person I mentioned before. She's undead. Actually, her totem, which is a model that every master gets for free, is the actual resurrectionist, the one that resurrected her. But the idea being that like there's usually not black and white good evil in this game, or at least one whole faction can't be good, one whole faction can't be evil.
Okay.
There's mix and match, but it's not like there are some genuinely good people and there are some genuinely irredeemable evil bastards. It's just not all one or the other.
Yeah, okay.
But like, if you want an irredeemable bastard, Seamus the Red Chapel Killer is your guy. We all hate him in a loving sort of way. He's Jack the Ripper. He's referred to as the Red Chapel Killer. But unlike Jack the Ripper, he can just resurrect his victims.
Yeah.
So his entourage is people he's killed by himself.
Oh wow, and his actual name is Sebastian as well. So
that's his cover.
His cover. Well, that's a good one for me then, isn't it? That's really cool.
And then there's like Dr. Frankenstein, who's like evil, but more of just the mentally unstable kind. His name is Douglas McMorning. Professor Von Stuck's also pretty evil, but he doesn't know he's evil, kind of a situation. He runs a school. It's not a good school.
Anyone can get through these checks in those days, can't they?
Okay. We can go. Why don't we go ahead and go into mechanics now, if you all are feeling up for learning about the game itself?
Yes.
It's totally cool to enjoy the models without playing the game, but there is a game that's involved. I personally love it, but it might not be your cup of tea. We will see. I really have to stop hitting my desk with my knee. Okay, first up, there is everything except the models is free. The rules, the player, as well as like the scoring pack that comes out every year that changes up how you play the game, the cards for each of the models, and the app also allows you to host games, so you can actually like track your own wounds and status effects and things like that in the app. It's very, very nice. I recommend going out there just to flip through it. You can get a feel for how the game works. You can read all the rules if you want. You can look at all the cards, so technically you can see the models as well. It is called Malifaux Crew Builder.
Just downloaded it.
And I'm actually friends with the guy that coded this.
Oh, nice.
I have contacts. But if you just go into like the cards section and just scroll, you see how many models there are in the game at this point. I want to say there's like roughly 350 boxes.
Wow.
I think. I've been keeping track of them because I've been doing assembly videos. And so each of those boxes usually holds like 2 to 4 models, except for the core boxes, which hold 6 sometimes. But okay, while you are downloading that, we can go into the basics of the rules. We'll just start from the very beginning. How do you start a game? I guess maybe best way of doing that. So you go up to your opponent, you give him a firm handshake, and you declare what your faction is. That is the first bit of information you declare. Unless, of course, you're like playing at a tournament, in which case you have to be the one you locked in at when you registered. But anyways, now you know your opponent's faction. You get a look at the pool, which is a deployment zone. We've got 4 of them. They're pretty drastically different, as in like you can actually change up your character, what you play with, depending on what that deployment zone is. I feel like 40K does have some stuff like that, but this can be from 8 inches in like a straight line versus a wedge shape or an L shape on either corner, which allows you to like deploy in effectively 2 different spots. And then there's corner, which is you're in the corner. It's a lot of running. I don't like running. After that, there is a strategy, which is the thing both of you are trying to score. Maxes out at 4 points. The pool of strategies changes every year and a half or so, whenever a different Gaining Grounds packet comes out. We call them Gaining Grounds. That's just the scoring rules that is currently modern. However, you can technically play with all of them available to you at the same time, which is a lot of stuff at this point. Anyways, you both know what you're supposed to be scoring for the strategy, and that's half points. Then you have a pool of 5 schemes. So each of you has access to these 5 schemes. You pick 2 of them. You do not tell your opponent what they are. They do not find out what they are until you start scoring them. So there is a specific way to score 1 point for it, and then at the end of the game, there is a specific way to score a second point for that. So the game caps out at 8 points, which doesn't seem like a lot, but ties do happen on occasion. It happens, but it just means that you know exactly how to achieve what you're trying to do, and it's not. They aren't easy for the most part. Sometimes you will just stumble into scoring something very easily, but also times you're like, oh, I should have taken this other thing. It seems so obvious. Why didn't I take this other thing? And these are not tied to killing, at least not nearly as much as most other minis games that I played or seen. Some of them require you to have your models killed by your opponent. Like a specific model has to be killed by your opponent.
So you can choose. You can choose one of these schemes that basically means that essentially you sacrifice the model, but you need to get that model killed. But then they could be choosing something where they don't want to kill everyone. So, am I right?
Yeah, I mean, there is good reason to be killing your opponent's models because you're denying them ways to score. But it is a way for your opponent to be like, oh, Hidden Martyrs is the name of that specific scheme. I don't think it's in this year's, but if Hidden Martyrs is in the pool, you're like, do I actually need to kill that model? That might be my opponent's Hidden Martyr target, and if they do, then I'm giving them points. But there are a wide variety of one. You'll have to look through them sometime. One of my favorites is one where you effectively have to have one of your models and your opponent's models next to each other at a specific designated terrain piece on the board, and we just assume that they're there to kiss. It's called Secret Meetup, okay?
Yeah.
I love that.
Sneaky link is what we call it in the UK.
I don't want to thank you.
Yeah, again, there's no killing involved. They both have to be alive in this specific spot. I mean, there also is stuff that does involve killing. Like one of the most common ones is called Assassinate, which involves you trying to kill your opponent's leader, which is the hardest thing to kill on their board most of the time.
Nice. It's a bit different then, isn't it? It's not literally just all out, got to kill this, capture these objectives, hold these objectives, so many turns until either broken or half dead, them are dead, roll morale checks and stuff like that. So it's none of that. So it's a bit more interesting, isn't it? So I like that. Well, it puts a different spin into how you play, doesn't it?
Yes, and it also allows for them to have non-combative models in the game. Like the journalist keyword I mentioned before, there's only one model in that entire keyword that has a weapon. And then it's just like a bunch of different reporters. Like on the card, some of them will have weapons, but like on the actual physical model, there is one lady with a big pickaxe. And then everyone else just looks like reporters and stuff.
Ah.
Okay. So you've picked your schemes, or you know what the schemes, how scoring is going to work. It is at that point you pick your leader. Most of the time when you hear people talking about Malifaux, they'll use the term leader and master interchangeably, and that's kind of a holdover from 2nd edition. 2nd edition, for the most part, you had one master that was kind of running your crew, and you couldn't hire any more. In 3rd edition, you can. They're just super expensive. But you have one person that is designated your leader, and their keyword that's on their card determines who you can hire without a tax. So you declare who your leader is, your opponent declares who their leader is, and at that point you pick which version of the leader you want to bring, now that you know what your opponent is bringing as far as a keyword, as well as what your crew's going to be. It's fairly recent mechanical development, but now each master has a second version of themselves. it's not an entirely different crew because everyone else in the crew has the exact same card. But the way the master plays can give you significant changes to how things work. Like, my favorite character her name is Tony Ironsides. Her first version, she is very much a beat-em-up brawler, but more so like because her entire crew has different auras that help each other because they're the Union. Her other version is she is now the president of the Union, and she can summon little worker dudes called drudges, as well as like move her own models across the board on her turn. So she becomes more of a support character.
Is that like the same concept with Seamus, for example? You've got the two character versions. You've got Seamus and you've got the Sebastian version, and obviously the two of those will have different abilities from one another. Okay.
Yep. The first one is a teleporting assassin sniper type person that doesn't involve his crew a whole ton. And the second version is a melee beater who has a lot more support, and his crew supports him more. If you want more killing, usually you go with Seamus because he can very reliably kill a model a turn.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Very reliably. So yeah, no, I just looked at your Tony Ironsides, and yes, a complete brawler, Union president, two completely same person who did two completely different things. But so am I right in saying so this you pick once you've said what side you are, once you've picked all your bits and pieces, you essentially can build your crew there and then. Is what you're doing, isn't it? You don't have a predetermined list. Okay.
So once you know the table, the scoring, and your opponent's keyword, you pick your list, because that allows you to counterpick. Because face-to-face, sometimes some keywords have an advantage over each other, so you need to bring stuff to make up for that. And that allows you to do that because you know what the keyword is before you hire your crew. Now, there is always the possibility someone could bring all out of keyword models. I don't think that's a good idea, because there's very little synergy in that, but someone could do that, just to bamboozle their opponent. But for the most part, like, if someone's bringing the keyword that's called augmented, which is the steampunk guy, his name is Charles Hoffman, he's a puppy, don't be mean to him. His entire keyword has a lot of armor. If your keyword doesn't have a lot of armor piercing, and you know you're going to need to do fighting, you need to bring stuff in your faction that can punch through armor. Stuff like that.
I get that. I get that. So now, sorry, going back to Seamus, that's just the one I'm looking at the moment. So obviously you've got his core box, which is obviously, that's all synergized. And then you've also got a few other options there. And I've just lost the bloody page. Hang on.
While you're looking, anything with the word core box in it is going to have a master. Their totem, which they always get for free, and 6 models that are good to bring with them.
Okay.
Anything that isn't will have that particular keyword at the bottom of the name of the box. I don't know if you can see that. That's forgotten.
So, for example, you've got the Seamus core box. Then the other two options you can add to it to synergize would be the Hats Off box, which has got Sebastian Baker in it. And then you've also got the Mourners box, which is also Red Chapel, and it has a Red Chapel and Revenant keyword. And I'm guessing that means it can synergize with any models from either of those keywords.
Yep. There's a lot of keyword crossover in the game. A lot of models have multiple keywords on them, no more than 2. That would get a little bit out of hand. But Seamus also has, let me check my list, the High Society box, which contains, I know at least, some dead dandies, so he finally branched out and started killing rich people, as well as Stranger's Keep, which is coming out this month.
Cool. And how many sort of models can you have in a gang or a warband, or is each model has a points value and you kind of add it up like that?
Yep, each model has a points value. See the number up in the corner? That's the cost.
Okay, yeah.
So Kabuki Warrior, he's kind of on the expensive side. Your typical schlubby minion guys are roughly 5 soul stones, whereas like a master is 15.
Right. Okay.
Most of the time. However, like you get your leader for free. So the only reason you're paying 15 or 16 in this case, because there's the tax, is if you want to bring a second one in.
Okay.
So your heavy hitters are almost always 10. Sometimes 9. So it fluctuates. That's how sort of cost balancing goes. However, unlike GW, when we're erratas things, it's usually not a points change. It's how the card works. I think that's a little bit more fun, but
Oh, sorry. Does the points totals per game, does that change then, like the amount for the pool based on other stuff, or is there a set pool number for every game?
The vast majority of games are played at 50 soul stones. Think points. We call them soul stones because whatever you do not spend becomes a resource that you can use in the game.
Oh.
So most people have like 5, 6, 7, 4, roughly around that soul stone. So most people are spending 45 on their models. There's also things called upgrades, which are small little benefits you can slap on a model. Some are more used than others. Like my faction has one that just about everyone brings because that takes your 6-card hand of cheat cards to 7 as long as that model's alive, and that's pretty strong. Yeah, then the soul stones you have left can be spent on drawing extra cards at the beginning of a turn, and models that have... There's 4 ranks of models in the game that just sort of explain their sort of power level. Minions, which is your weakest dudes, those are the ones you could bring multiples of. Then there's enforcers, which tend to be just slightly more powerful, but they don't get any benefits from soul stones. Henchmen, which is your second most powerful, and masters. Masters and henchmen can use the soul stones for positive flips or damage reduction. There's a list of things that they can be used for. So sometimes people bring a lot, depending on what they need them for. Like the Dreamer is a Neverborn master, and I've seen people bring 10 soul stones with him because he can summon.
Oh. Oh, well, you can bring people onto the board then.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Sorry, if you're going to buy like an out of keyword, then like we were talking, like is that like a flat increase for everybody, or is it?
It's +1.
It's +1. Okay.
If you bring someone that doesn't have your keyword, it's +1. There are things called versatile models, and that's just pile of models your faction can hire without the tax. So anyone can hire these models.
Did those kind of fall into like some of the mercenaries and things like that then?
Yeah, some of them were mercenaries. Some of them are just like, we've designed this model to be kind of useful to everyone, or like, we know your faction's really bad at this type of scoring or handling this type of mechanics, so we have this one model that anyone can hire that's good at dealing with that kind of mechanic.
Cool.
Some are more popular than others. It's always going to happen with a game this big, but the balance is pretty good. Okay. Moving on the rules, that's how you start the game. Then you pick after you've built your crew, you pick your schemes, and you start the game. As I've alluded to before, the game does not use dice. It uses a deck of cards called a fate deck.
I actually found my old one here, my puppet deck from way back in the day.
So done.
Oh, the puppet deck. Yeah. That's actually pretty rare, I think. Now this one's technically for the other side because it's branded by the the King's Empire faction, but it is really just it's just a poker deck with your face cards being numbers. So jacks are now 11, queens are 12, kings are 13, and the jokers are in the deck. The jokers are fun because they completely swing things one way or the other for you. So while this game has a lot more randomness mitigation in the fact that you can cheat over things you want, the jokers are the one wrench that can mess you up or mess your opponent up. So the black joker is the really, really bad one, where all the other cards in the deck are 1 through 13, the black joker is 0, and you cannot cheat over it, which is a big thing. Because most of the time, if you want something to go off and you have a card in your hand to do it, you can cheat it in. The red joker is a 14, and will override any sort of bad things that normally happen. We'll get into the negative positive flips later. But so, your RNG is a deck of cards. The thing that keeps it from being a gimmick is the suits matter. If you look at any card, here, we'll look at the Busy Warrior again. You see the different actions they can do, and then underneath it, indented, are these little symbols plus extra text. If you flip that particular symbol on your card, you can declare that extra bit of text. These are called triggers, and the trigger system really makes the game sort of bloom as far as tactics and strategy. So that one I showed you, like Critical Strike, is one of the more simple ones. You can kind of see it there. The top one, it's the ram. That's just +1 damage. But other things be like moving your opponent, moving yourself, something as extreme as like summoning or outright killing something if your opponent doesn't discard a resource. There's a ton of different stuff in there. But that keeps keeps it from being a gimmick and really adds to the complexity in a good way in the game. On top of that, I've mentioned before, but you get a cheat hand. Every turn you draw 6 cards, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on what you're playing or what your opponent brings. And those cards you can use to override a flip if you need something to go off. Simple as that. You can only cheat once per duel. So when you're going against your opponent and you like, oh, I'm losing by like 2, I'm going to cheat in this 11, which puts me up by 2 to my opponent. And then my opponent cheats in a king, which suddenly makes it a tie. I can't re-cheat after that. That's the only thing. 1 card per. The one thing that anyone who's starting the game will take a while to figure out is how difference matters as far as those end results. So if I'm wanting to like shoot someone with a gun on my gunsmith or whoever, defender loses in the case of a tie. But if I tie someone, I'm on what's called a double negative flip. This is exactly like advantage, disadvantage in D&D. So there's negative flips and positive flips. In the case of a negative flip, you flip an extra card per negative, and you take the lowest. If you have a positive flip, then you flip an extra card per positive, and you get a pick, whichever one that is. The diffs matter in that a tie is a double negative, a difference of 1 through 5 is a single negative, a 6 through 10 is a what we call a straight flip, so just a singular card off the deck, and then a difference of 11 or higher is a positive flip. It's just the one thing that you just will take a while to memorize. The one other thing is that if you have a negative flip, you cannot cheat that. So negative flips are very important for when you don't want to die. Because if your opponent's like Seamus, the Red Chapel Killer, the first version, his gun is one of, if not the most powerful weapons in the game. It has a 4, 6, 8 damage track. And the way the damage tracks work is each card has its own severity. Cards 1 through 5 are weak, cards 6 through 10 are moderate, and face cards are severe. So when I'm flipping damage, if I flip like a 1 and a 5 on a negative flip, or like a 1 and 11 on negative flips, since it's a negative flip, I have to take the lower card, which is a 1, which means Seamus does 4 damage. Whereas if you just do a straight flip and hey, I got a jack, that's a severe, that's 8 damage. It's twice as much damage.
And
so if you're on a negative flip, you can't cheat that. Yes.
And that's that's it. So like, you know, like say there, like you got an 8, like a minion, normally like 5 health, am I right? You know, they're just straight dead then, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's why he's really good at killing things. There's a lot of ways to mitigate it, though. So there's things can be tough in different ways. So there's an ability called Hard to Wound, which means that someone who's flipping their damage against you, that damage has a negative flip on it. So it stacks on top of whatever the diff was. Armor just straight up reduces damage. Something called Hard to Kill means that if you are not at 1 wound, you can't die. So if Seamus shoots a minion that's got like 5 wounds but hard to kill, and he does 8 damage to it, it'll go down to 1 damage, but it won't die.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
On top of like having better defensive stats and crap like that.
Well, I definitely know if I buy a box, I know who I'm going for. I'm definitely going to get the Seamus box.
You and a weird majority women players in the game. I don't entirely know why, outside of like the true crime aspect, but girls really like Seamus.
Yeah,
that was my wife's first, and she now refers to it as her toxic boyfriend. Because it's legitimately a bad person.
I think I've always been that sort of person. Whenever I've played games or watched film or anything, I've always gravitated towards like the evil side of things. Because I think, especially in games, you've normally got a bit more freedom and fun with the guys who are, you know, the bad guys. You know, whereas, you know, the good guys, they're following a strict code. They have to do this, they have to do that. I'm like, get rid of all that. I want to be bad. I want to do what I want to do. This isn't real life. I want to do anything.
Freedom and fun is a pretty wild way to describe Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
Well, he thought he was free and he was having fun, so...
Yeah, well...
Okay. I think we can possibly quickly go over the cards here, because each box comes with cards. If you do get in the game and you get red boxes and they have cards in them, one thing you want to do is you want to go onto the app, check the card that is on the app, and specifically the back of the card that is on the app, because it will have a little phrase, errata, and then like a month and a year. Mm-hmm. If your card does not match the back of that, you need new cards. So that's the one thing about, since they distribute these things in cards, is if something gets changed, they can't exactly go and change the cards inside those boxes they've already sold. However, at least in America, cards are 50 cents a pop on Wargame Vault to print after the fact.
Wow.
And you can also just use the app and never actually use your physical card if you want. But anyways, okay, so each card thing has a name. This is a Kabuki Warrior. It costs 8 soul stones. It is Minion 2, which means you can hire 2 of them. It is the living characteristic, which certain things only affect living characters, like a medic type person will have like a healing action, but it can only affect living characters. Some things will be like living in a construct, or undead in a construct, or undead. And things like ghosts don't have any characteristics because they're freaking ghosts. This will also determine what kind of marker they drop when they die, because corpses and scrap on the battlefield from dead things can be used for stuff and shenanigans, like summoning.
Oh, okay. So what do you, when people die, you just leave a model on the board, or you leave tokens by them, or is it that kind of thing?
You leave a token by them. Just a 30mm token, corpse scrap. There's also 30mm tokens called scheme markers, which is where a lot of the scoring comes in. So you just need like a bundle of 30mm markers. Fun fact, bottle caps are almost exactly 30mm, so sometimes people will use those.
Nice.
As well, the faction logo on the side of the box is also roughly 30mm.
Nice.
So if you're real cheap, just cut that out. Okay, after the characteristics, you've got, that's a Bunraku. Kabuki Warrior at all. You got the keyword. The Kabuki Warrior is the King Gong keyword, which is the blackmailing, information brokering geisha lady. I love her keyword because you don't really see that kind of thing in a lot of other games, because a lot of her models also don't have weapons or obvious weapons. So our stats here, our stat line, 4 stats that really matter in Malifaux. You got your defense, you got your willpower, you've got your movement, and you've got your size. So defense and willpower, probably pretty straightforward. They're the number you add the card value to when you flip a card. So if someone's attacking you and they're attacking your defense, which the vast majority of damaging attacks do, you flip a card, you add that to the DF number, and that's what your total is. Willpower is the same, but for like mental attacks for the most part. A lot of them still do damage, but a lot more mental attacks do other shenanigan effects. Tony Ironside, her bread and butter action is called Bring It, which forces the opponent to move towards her, and then if they can attack her, they have to attack her. And that might sound bad, but she also has a defensive ability that hits people back when they attack her, like just goes off. Which is very good at counterpunching. Movement, that's how fast you can walk in one action. Each model has 2 action points to spend for each activation they have. The game is a back and forth activation situation, so one of my models goes, one of your model goes, one of my model goes, to mitigate the action economy and the activation economy, which I heard somewhere that Warcry had a bit of an issue with. If you bring a bunch of models, then you can activate a bunch of crappy ones, and then eventually your opponent has run out of their stuff, and then you have a bunch of activations with your good shit that your opponent can't react to. At the start of every turn, you gain things called pass tokens if you have fewer models than your opponent. So you can spend one of those, and that counts as an activation, so you can pass to make sure that your opponent has to keep going with their stuff. Sidetrack to that. Movement, it's your walk you can spend on 1 AP. So you can do a double walk if you want to run across the board. Things will target move in the game. It is still technically a defensive stat. The most common thing is stuff like grenades, which they place a marker down on the board, and then everything within like 2 inches or 1 inches of it has to pass a test. Otherwise they get hit by it. So that's actually something to keep in mind. Your card will almost always have some kind of weakness on it. It just depends whether or not your opponent can exploit that. Same thing with size. That's mostly used for if you can see over the person or what that thing can see over, but some things will also target size, like a suplex. If you're a big boy, you can't get suplexed as easily or thrown around. So those aren't targeted as much, but they will sometimes be targeted.
Just a quick one on movement. Is that in inches? Is it or?
Yeah, it's inches.
And then size, is that inches as well? Is it?
Technically, that's how you measure terrain. However, if you hold a ruler up to a model, it's almost never going to be equal to its size.
Yeah.
I always refer to it as kind of like the presence of the model. So something bulkier might have a bigger size despite being only 5 feet tall. It's roughly it is roughly in inches, and 1 inch is roughly 3 feet in this game. So most people are size 2. Most gremlins are size 1. Most monstrous big things are size 3 and 4.
And then just asking then on that, then excuse me if I'm jumping, but is there line of sight and stuff like this for terrain and how that works?
Uh-huh.
So it works on that kind of principle. Then, like, I can see you behind that terrain, but if like a miniature is a little bit smaller, it's kind of agreed kind of size, is it, or is it what you see? Do you get what I'm asking?
It's effectively a cylinder off of your base. There's 3 base sizes in the game, 30, 40, and 50 millimeter. So effectively a model that is on a 50 millimeter base and like size 4 will block line of sight for anything that is size 3, 2, or 1 that is behind it fully.
Nice.
Line of sights are drawn from the edges of the base. A lot of times you can still see stuff by looking like kind of around it. However, if any of those like lines goes through some stuff, different terrain effects will have different effects on like shooting and whatnot. The game is normally played with a relatively dense terrain board. It's not as bad as what Infinity has to do, but you don't want bowling alleys. There are some people that will take severe advantage of long distance shooting without any cover.
Yeah. I know that's fair enough. So you don't get caught out for because some of the models have some extravagant flourishes and their limbs are all outside the hoses and stuff. But so it's nice that it's kept to that set. That I like because other game systems are like, oh, I can see the corner of his cloak. It's like you wouldn't see the corner of his cloak. you know. It's like he's not flourishing behind that piece of scenery. He's hiding, like. So I like that. I like the cylinder. And I like how that works.
Actually, I guess I should have seen that question coming because that is a thing, or was a thing, still is a thing. I don't actually know the rules on 40K right now. The base.
I was just gonna say it keeps changing. Some of them I don't agree with.
The base is all that matters, which also means that we have a fairly lax proxy policy. I have been playing this one crew with a Guild Ball model for years, and no one's ever cared to question me on it. I mean, it fits better than the original model. My keyword is a bit of a hodgepodge from other stuff, so there's some aesthetic issues with it, and one of the characters is this Steamborg executioner horrifying monstrosity guy. Think like a Drider, but it's metal spider parts as opposed to actual spider parts, and also tentacles for some reason. That doesn't really fit in too well with the idea of a union, a mining union, so I grabbed a guy that is literally from the Miners Guild Ball team. Proxies are pretty chill. And it also allows for them to just go a little bit nuts with base overhang on occasion.
Nice. No, that's good.
The T-Rex is a bit much.
There's a T-Rex?
Give me 1 sec. I'm gonna go get it.
You got a T-Rex?
No, it's very interesting. I really like. I mean, for me, the first thing I look at is, do I like the look of the models? That's the first thing I think about, and then I go, okay, I like the models. What's the game system like? It's just like I've just done that Kickstarter for that boss battler called Grim Coven. That they released recently, and that looks awesome. You've got all these fantastic models and just hundreds of models in this boss battler game, and I've done that because the models look great, and I was hoping the game's good.
Okay, so mind that the model doesn't actually come with the skateboard or the sunglasses. But yeah, that's the Malifaux Rex.
Wow.
It's very spiky and just slightly tentacly.
Wow. Okay.
But
that's
is that a 50 mil base then, is it?
Yeah, this guy on this size base. It's a little bit of an overhang. The thing is, though, that base to base sometimes does matter in the game. Occasionally, there is like something called a 0-inch range for some folks. So these ones that do have overhang, facing doesn't matter, and there at least be part of the base where you can turn them so things can get into base to base with them. Yeah, it's not impossible to play with, but yeah, Weird goes a little nuts with the overhang sometimes.
No. I love it. It doesn't hold back from the models. It makes awesome models, and you don't get caught out for something stupid. Like, it's just like, I can see his cloak behind it, or I can see his elbow, and you're just like, no, I like it.
There really isn't that. You're supposed to declare the size, the height of terrain when you start. Okay. So technically, once you have that knowledge, the only thing you would need is one of those laser line measuring things to see if any of your base can see any of their base, kind of a situation.
Yeah. Nice. Sorry,
Declared intent, at least. No, this is important. Declared intent is very important in the community. So as long as you say, I'm attempting to do this and it looks like I can, if later on measuring happens and you're like a couple millimeters out or something, people give you a pass. There's very, very rarely that sort of.
So it's not as toxic as the Warhammer community then.
We've got.
Yeah.
We've got women.
Wow, yeah.
we got actually a lot.
Yeah.
No,
I'm going to buy a box.
I did the math, and at one point, like I think around now, kind of hard to determine what qualifies, but there's roughly 40% female sculpts and almost 50% in the master category.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
And also, weirdly enough, the majority of the heavy beaters are women. if that's your sort of thing, there's a couple, there's a decent amount of step on me mommies in the game. If that's your thing. If that's your thing. There's also not a ton of cheesecake, which is a bit of a departure from first edition. Chad probably remembers how Lady Justice may have looked back in that edition. They've given her considerably more clothes and made her look more professional. There is occasionally the cheesecake, but it's usually in a place where, like, this is actually how they would actually look. Like the geisha lady, who is an information broker. Obviously, she uses skin to get information out of people. The performer keywords got some ladies that are scantily clad for the time, which means, like, ankles are out, and that's about it. But
a touch of shoulder.
And to be fair, there is a decent amount of slutty men as well. Yeah.
So, child slaughter and slutty men. I'm well in here. I am.
Oh Christ.
I think at one point we were talking about gameplay.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
I mean, the thing is that if you look at the cards on the app and whatnot, there's just a lot there. Even stuff that's relatively cheap, there's a lot of options. The game extremely rewards good tactical play versus list building. Although you can make some mistakes that will cost you in the list building, but even if you know that your opponent has some advantages on you just because of what they happen to choose, if you play smart, you will beat them most of the time. Like, very rarely do wins or losses come down to luck.
Yeah, we should definitely get a core box each, Steve, I reckon.
What's that, sorry, Seb?
I said we should definitely get a core box each, get it painted up, and then I'll come down to your shop and game.
No, that's it. To be fair, as you've explained it, because I was very worried about, like, the card system, how it works. Now I'm not worried about it. It's actually quite it's quite easy, the mechanics of the cards and how that works. Like you explained, like the guns and wounds, like you've got low, middle, highs. And looking at the cards here as you're discussing it, it is really quite simple to understand, like, you know. So, and
it seems like a game that's easy to play but hard to master. I think that for me, that's how it feels.
Extremely high skill ceiling. And that also, like, the great thing is, like, you usually dedicate yourself to three keywords. That's sort of the general rule, the unspoken rule. You'll start with the one you like and learn them, and then possibly venture out to someone else that you either really like or is good at the things that your original keyword is bad at, and then usually pick up an ancillary third. I've been playing the same three keywords for the most part, although I do branch out quite often now just to actually make use of all the models that I bought and haven't played with. But that's roughly what most people's brain space allows for. Like, deep knowledge is three keywords. I don't think I've ever seen anyone, like, play a whole faction or the majority of a faction willingly.
Nice.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely start with the Seamus box. I think I'll get that and then learn the core box, and then look at going, okay, let's buy something else with, like, the same keyword, and then add it to it and play it and see what the difference, in mechanics is.
Couple things, because then we can get talking in the models for our last half hour, because I think most of you guys are especially interested in the hobby aspect. I can talk about the mechanics of the game for days, about specific situations and whatnot. I don't know what you're interested in, so unless you want to speak up about things, I'll just say a few things. Everyone's really, really complicated. Well, no, there are simple models, but complicated and it'll take a while for you to learn, and there'll be a lot of times like, oh, I can do this. Oh, I can do this one thing. This is really, really cool. almost nothing dies turn one. I can count the amount of games I've played where something died turn one on 2 fingers, actually, because it's literally only happened to me twice in the 9 years I've been playing this game. So there is never that instance of, oh, I painted this cool thing and you put it on the board and it dies before you can do anything with it. Most things, everything gets into turn 2 and most things get into turn 3. The minions are the ones you're most worried about, like, possibly dying, but also those aren't, like, your cool centerpiece things you spent hours and hours upon painting. So, like, the most recent one, I was playing a game as the drunken kung fu gremlin monks, and my little tiny totem guy that came with my brewmaster got shot by a sniper that has a special ability where he can come onto the board anywhere he wants, not in his deployment zone. It just has to be, like, so far away from my deployment zone, which does have a mechanic in, like, 40k. My other turn, the other time I did that was in 2nd edition. The other thing is that your suits, the trigger system is something that's going to take a while to get your head wrapped around. And the idea of you're not always going to be cheating in your highest card when you want something to go off because you need the suit. Certain actions only go off if you have the suit you need. That's the limiting factor for, like, really powerful things. Like, summoners almost always require a suit and a high card to summon something. So that's how summoning is kind of balanced, because you usually have to spend a good resource for the thing to go off. And the master is nerfed in a way where, like, because they're bringing in models into the game, they don't have as much impact as a master that can't summon. There's a ton of movement. Like, that is one thing that you will be very surprised of from 40k, and I think a decent amount of other games, that you move your own stuff out of, like, walk actions and your opponent's stuff outside of walk actions a whole ton. Because locations, placements, and being engaged has so much of an effect on scoring. So, like, one of the strategies, my favorite strategy this season is called Stuff the Ballots. And you've got, like, 7 markers on the board that are like ballot boxes, and your models run up to them and then they vote. And so each ballot box you have that has more votes than your opponent's helps you score the strategy. The one balancing thing being, like, once there's 7 votes in there, it, like, resets. But say someone runs up to a ballot box and you know the next turn they're going to vote for it, you can just drag their ass across the map and keep them from doing that.
Nice.
I did one TikTok a while back about, like, one of my more complex plays that sort of shows off the tactics of this game. My opponent was set up to score something where he had to be, like, where the center line met the edge of the table. He had to have a scoring marker and a model there, and he already had that stuff in place, and I didn't have anything that could kill that model, but he had something that could kill that model, and I had something that could force his thing to take an action. Because it specifically was a construct, so I have, like, a gremlin mechanic guy that can force constructs to take actions. So I forced his construct to take this action to charge, hit the guy that was with the scoring marker, and the intent was I was going to declare a trigger that allowed him to pull the guy away so that he was no longer positioned to score, but I ended up accidentally killing him anyways, so whoops.
Still what?
But also, before that, I had to move one of my models away from it because it can't charge when it's engaged, so I actually had to disengage him with someone else so I could pull this bullshit off.
It's interesting, though. That's quite varied and interesting, then.
Yeah, so for playing, like, older editions of the games and having, like, some of the models left over and things like that, is that something where the old metal models kind of carry forward, or do they only work as, like, proxies and stuff like that?
If they are the version of the character in the game, then they are perfectly viable. Like, they don't even count as proxies, they're that model. But they definitely have an updated 2nd edition, because from 1st to 2nd there was an entire aesthetics change.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really like the 1st edition aesthetics, to be perfectly honest. There are a couple models that have died. 4 masters, right, there we go, 4 masters. One from the Arcanist, his name was Victor Ramos, he's in prison now. Nicodem is from the Resurrectionist, he's the generic zombie horde summoner, so kind of boring. And then from the Neverborn, they lost the Nephilim Queen, because her sister usurped her, and the other one was the Puppet Guy, which I believe they just didn't really know what to do with him lore-wise.
Okay.
And also he's one of those, like, really, really awful characters that you don't really want to talk to people about, because his shtick is involving children.
Nice.
There's some dark stuff from first edition that they've let go. They've grown as a company, so like Seamus, because of his victims, he doesn't get a lot of screen time. There's another character called Leviticus who also has some bad stuff, and he never gets any screen time except for now. But they kind of just set him up to die in the most recent lore, which I'm happy with. But yeah, no, those count as long as you aren't trying to play Nicodem or Ramos or Lilith or Collodi. And they actually still have third edition cards, but they're referred to as Dead Man's Hand, and the vast majority of tournaments don't allow Dead Man's Hand.
So then essentially you could use the older models, but just get the updated cards and things like that, and it pretty much works.
Exactly.
Cool.
I believe first edition also had the avatars. I don't know if you're around for that. Okay, those now qualify as something called the Emissary, which is a versatile model that sort of represents the entire faction. Those are valid legal proxies for the Emissary. Yeah, okay. We can talk, unless you have other mechanic stuff, we can talk about models now, which I'm sure you all are excited about. The reason you're here today, actually, and even if you don't end up not liking the game, you're more likely to like the models at least, because it's something slightly different. Not a lot of Western Victorian stuff out there. The one warning I give everyone, the worst part about Malifaux is assembling models.
Oh, yeah.
That's how it is. Second edition was bad. They've gotten better, but you assembled the Bass box, right?
That's right, yeah.
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 That is...
Some of the bits were so small.
Yep. No, they've made a concerted effort to be better, but a lot of their models haven't been updated from second edition. Some of them are really hard. That's why I'm doing the YouTube series, so that makes this a lot easier to do. The instructions are online, but they are an exploded render, so that's not the easiest thing for some people. I have in my hands one of the worst sprues out there, so I do have a video for this one too. These are called Night Terrors. They're little four-winged bat dudes, and they're like 20 bits.
Jesus.
And there are 4 of them.
Wow.
I'll say Seamus was relatively easy, except for I think one of the Rotten Bells has an open umbrella, and attaching the umbrella to the pole part of it was a little bit hard, but Seamus doesn't have anything really nightmarish about him.
Oh, good. I like the Jackdaw model as well. That looks really that box looks really cool as well. They're really interesting.
I'm trying to think. Outside of like ropes, which you just need to be careful around, also not a terrible assembly experience.
Yeah.
But again, if you are concerned about that, you just ask someone in the community and they'll tell you if it's like really, really hard to put together, or
yeah.
Most of us are willing to do assemblies for our friends. I realize that's kind of asking a bit much for you to send stuff to the States, but I've got friends over there you can ship them to and they'll be happy to assemble them for you. We want people to play the game, so we're happy to do that. So 60-something masters in the game, so slightly about the same amount of keywords, but obviously there's crossover in the factions. Okay, scale and complexity. Complexity was the assembly, but that's also a good thing in that there are like 2 boxes in the entire game that you would have to buy multiples of. Technically 3, but the third one is most people just magnetize it. And going into that, every model is unique, with the exception of those few boxes. So they repeat the sculpts of the rats, because there's like 12 rats. They repeat the sculpts of the Bayou Gremlins, because there's like 8 Bayou Gremlins. And I think Guild Pathfinders. But unlike army games, if you get like 3 minions, you get 3 very distinct minions. Different poses, usually different outfits. It depends on if like they're expected to be in some kind of uniform or not, but it doesn't matter how cheap they are versus how expensive. There's still a lot of effort put into that, which I'm sure you notice with like the frontiersmen. Is that what they're called?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember Bass's minions.
No, Frontiers. I mean, that was, so obviously getting into it, I got the core box, built the core box, and I was thinking even just the amount of effort that went into the Frontiersmen, you think they're going to be like pretty special individuals, but I mean, not that they're bad, like, but they're not, they're not the leader, they're not this, they're not that, but they're still very detailed sculpts and they look awesome, So, yeah. I tell you what, the effort that goes into these sculpts and all the individual characters is quite a lot. I do, they do look smart.
Yeah, no, that's them. I'm starting to get slightly frazzled here, so I've been talking for too long. Yeah, it says the card says minion 3, then you'll get 3 distinct sculpts. And for the most part, people don't field all 3. In fact, a lot of times they don't even field 2 of them. So it really is a case of pick your favorite, and that's the one you will put the effort into painting up and putting on the table. Like, again, with some exceptions, like summon stuff you'll sometimes get the maximum amount of. But other than that, yeah, the meta mostly shifts towards bringing different things as much as possible, so multiple minions are not that common, and if they are, it's 2. Never seen anyone willingly put 3 of a minion on the board. Scale is not heroic. It is, I think true scale is the common term.
Yeah.
So everything is shaped like, for the most part, like a human's supposed to be, if it's a human. If not, whatever. Which means faces are slightly tougher to paint, hands are smaller, but it looks more realistic. Next thing. Assembly, complexity, variety, representation, blah, blah, blah. Nowadays, when you get multiple minions, again, 3 is the most common number you'll get of minions you can bring. It's usually 2 male, 1 female, or 2 female, 1 male. Sometimes all 3 of them are one gender, but it's very rare. And sometimes it's sort of like done to make up for things. Like the sort of iconic poster child of the game is Lady Justice, the blind swordsman. Her dudes are the death marshals. They are the cowboys with the flaming skulls with coffins strapped to their backs and big guns on their hips. The plastic death marshals from 2nd edition were all masculine shaped. I mean, you can't really tell gender because their heads are on fire, but they're masculine shaped. In 3rd edition, she got a brand new box, and all of those death marshals are much more shaped feminine, which I always thought was kind of nice. So really, gender sexism isn't nearly as much a thing in the lore, and that seems pretty obvious considering how many powerful female characters there are. But you also, again, get a variety of genders and races in your minions, all the way up to masters. Unique sculpts, kind of went over that. Nightmare, Rotten Harvest, alts, and miss models. This thing can possibly be confusing for hobbyists, just looking into the game. Weird has a fun habit of creating a lot of alt sculpts for stuff. This can be individual models, which is referred to as their Miss line. For a long time, they were making female versions of male models, and they were like Miss Feasance, Miss Step, Miss Anthrope. Gotta love puns. They also have a yearly box called a Nightmare Box, which is just a complete redesign of the aesthetics of one, usually a core box. So last year's was a Dark Souls-esque relook at the good Lich lady. The Malifaux has effectively a Lich, or maybe like a reverse Lich, because her stick is like everything within 10 meters or so of her doesn't die. In fact, it comes back to life. She can't turn it off. But she's like infinity years old, and she's very grandma coded, so probably has hard candies on her person somewhere. But they made her into like an evil Lich King looking thing as far as aesthetics go. Year before that was actually kind of similar. For the first time, they did kind of similar aesthetic changes, and that was a robot dude. Turned him into like a Lord Knight person with a bunch of half robot, half living models. We've got a cyberpunk box. For the people that do the trains, or that actually build the train lines, there's a cyberpunk box called Malifaux 1988, which is a massive pain to put together. One of the few things, running things with the Nightmare box is usually harder to assemble than their normal counterpart.
Good name, though.
Yeah, it's fitting. It's just the Wild Ones is the only one I feel like most people shouldn't ever attempt to put together, and that's their biker gang version of Malifaux's version of Indiana Jones. Like steampunk biker gang. So the one dude that's on a chopper, it's like a steam engine with wheels, and there are a couple people on like mono wheels, like big metal singular wheels, driving around Malifaux. So every year they come out with a new Nightmare box, and now every year they're coming out with a new Rotten Harvest, which is more whimsical, usually Halloween themed.
Mm-hmm.
And until recently, they have all been Neverborn versions of these models. I think they actually all pre-assembled. Very few models in the game are pre-assembled. They occasionally do it either A, because the model is way too hard to put together and they acknowledge that, which is like exactly one box in the entire game, or these alts. Yeah, like last year they did a Gene Wilder Frankenstein homage, cartoony looking box, as opposed to someone from the Neverborn. This was Professor von Stuck, so an alt of him. What else? So sometimes people put thing on the board and you're like, what the hell is that? Looks nothing like the model that I know of. And the way to like check and see if someone has an alt is your handy dandy app. If you click on a card of some kind, like if you look up von Stuck, Vonschtook, got Professor von Stuck, you go up to the name at the top and you see there's actually a drop down for it. It'll let you select something else, and this is Dr. Frankenstein.
Ah, wow.
Ah, yeah. Other than the Seamus, you got Seamus 1, Seamus 2.
Yeah, Seamus is one. He turns into like Helena Bonham Carter.
Yeah, I was still on that, and then there's a puppet Seamus as well. That's cool.
You don't like Seamus, do you?
I think he's
Me?
well cool. I love him. I think he's awesome.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, you're just scrolling through the app now and look at stuff.
So then with those alternate sculpts, Rotten Harvest, things like that, is that usually something where they have like an open window, and then once that's done, they stop sending those out, like a limited edition kind of thing?
It's available at Gen Con.
Oh, okay.
Everything that they sell at Gen Con is also available out of their web store. And outside of the Gen Con sale, which just sells stuff that's at Gen Con, so the current new alts, if you want older alts, they have a sale on Black Friday and Easter, which is where you can get that stuff, unless they're actually like out of it. There are a couple boxes you can't really get a hold of, but and a lot of those alt models are actually like tie-in giveaways. If you like spend $100, you can get one of these alt models, and so you spend $300 on minis, you get 3 alts, and you get to pick which one of those they are.
Cool.
With yourselves and getting stuff, is Malifaux, do you where do you order it from? How do you get hold of the models and stuff? Because obviously we have to go to our independent to get them, and if they don't have them, it's not as easy to get hold of over here.
I'm trying to remember like who the big seller out of the UK is. I can ask one of my friends.
Wayland Games.
It's Wayland. That's who it is. Thank you.
But as you say, yeah, if they're not on there, then you probably haven't got much chance of finding them elsewhere. But to be fair, Wayland Games are pretty good at restocking their stuff, to be fair.
I do know that for most people that are outside of the US, if they want these, especially the alts, they'll just do a group purchase with their friends, so they only have to pay for one shipping. And when you're spending $600, $700 for 3 or 4 people, that shipping's a little easier to swallow.
Yeah, of course.
I think it's interesting too, because I just saw a bit of news that Word actually put out an official STL for a model. And so, I mean, is that maybe something where we're going to be kind of, I mean, to me, I think they're kind of one of the first miniature game companies that's put out like an official STL. So maybe that'll be an option in the future, it's looking like.
It's bit of a story behind that. That specific STL is to go with a global campaign that just ended. And the campaign was they had the STL of that character. And that character, we were to decide which faction she went into. And so people would play games and they'd do reports on it, and then they would vote for what faction they wanted her to go into. So each faction had a specific keyword, and she was going to gain that keyword, and they released artwork of what she would look like if she went into that keyword. But the STL is because that also the campaign came with a new game type, or basically an add-on to a game, so you had an additional way to score that involved her. So to have a model on the board, they created an STL as opposed to just making you use a marker.
Okay. I mean, that's an interesting.
The fact that they're willing to do that means that.
Yeah. I mean, even so, even if that doesn't mean they're going to move kind of more towards that direction, it still is cool that they're kind of putting a lot of that stuff in the hands of the players, as opposed to, with Warhammer, you get kind of used to like, all right, here's our little tease that we have, and that means in a couple months' time we're going to have a pre-order up. Whereas it seems like the weird web store, like, I mean, you can see months and months, like they've got all the way up until fall, it looks like, plotted out as far as what's going to be available for pre-order, keywords, all that kind of info that you don't really need to kind of wait and kind of get spoon-fed tiny amounts of it. That's pretty rad.
So their distribution is nice. They do have a decent amount of shipping issues that they can't really control. Apparently all shipping across the Pacific just kind of sucks. But if you play a faction, your faction is getting stuff every couple of months. New models. If you are dedicated to one singular keyword, you're getting something every year and a half, roughly. It's not a ton because you have a keyword and the keyword's only going to be like 15 unique cards at most, but the game is slowly expanding and you're always getting a little bit of something for yourself. But if you're a collector, especially like a whole faction, you're getting a lot more stuff at a fairly regular basis. They don't abandon any factions or keywords unless it's the Bayou and it's about lore, because they don't matter to the story.
But it's nice. There's everything in there, which is pretty so, and at least it's interesting. So if you are in something, chances are you're still going to be getting new stuff.
Mm-hmm. They have a newsletter they come out with every Wednesday. Sometimes it's previews, sometimes it's discussing cards. They'll reveal this year's Nightmare box, and it's called Waldo's Weekly. Their mascot is a little imp called Waldo.
Nice.
But they're really good at communications. If you're ever missing a bit, let them know. I've never had an issue ever receiving replacement bits for stuff that was mispackaged or lost. I know the person that does that. They're extremely kind. They realize that because the bits there's a lot of bits and they're smaller, they have a tendency to pop off sometimes. So they'll replace them very easily without any question, at least for the most part, without any question. Other things involving Malifaux I'll get into real quick because we're kind of hitting up time. I don't want to make you guys stay up too late. And then once I get done with this, we'll have any additional questions you might have remembered, and then we can close it off. Yeah? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Tie-in stuff. Where is the community? Most of us have moved on to Discord. There is one official Facebook group. It's called A Weird Place, AWYRDPLACE. Most of us have moved away from that because Discord's a little bit easier to socialize with, but stuff gets posted there all the time. Okay, so that's the Facebook group. You can check there. All the announcements and typical stuff are there, but a lot more of it's on Discords. There's one official Discord called Play Weird. I believe it's the name of it. You should be able to, from their media, should be able to find it. Other than that, you find a content creator, and almost all of us have our own Discords. So I've been running mine. I've got like 300 people in there. So close, decently close group of friends, but that's where you're going to get socialization. There is an active online play community because I don't know if you know what Vassal is. It's an engine for people to build game systems inside of, and someone built one for Malifaux. So you can actually play Malifaux online. So technically you don't even need models. It's just fairly complex and most people don't want to deal with it. But there is an active Vassal League. So if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you really want to play, you can still hop onto Vassal and play someone in a different country.
There we go, Steve. Sounds like we need a hobby club Malifaux online game.
Oh, hell yeah. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
What's Douglas? What's your YouTube channel?
The Artifactors Union, ARTEFACTOR. Artifacting with an E is a skill in the RPG that's like you do complex robots and shit. So I thought that was fitting for a guy who does assembly videos.
I found it.
But content creators, I am the Artifactors Union, and I am Steam Powered Scoundrels. On YouTube, you have folks like Danger Planet and Corner Case is on hiatus. However, Defective Dice does a lot of the lore stuff as well as some gameplay. If you want to get a good introduction to how to play the game, Malifaux University exists on YouTube. And as far as podcasts, I'll obviously plug myself, but my favorite British one is called Harlefaux, and they just enjoy having fun with decent production quality. They're known as TNG Productions on YouTube, I think.
Okay, cool. Sweet.
There's a decent amount of us. So, go ahead.
I was just saying, linking and joining everything right now.
Yeah, same. That's the same here.
Tie-in RPG. There is an RPG. It's called Through the Breach. I'm probably the biggest voice for that game. Lovely system. About as complex as D&D, but you're encouraged to multi-class every time you level.
Wow.
There's about 60 classes now.
Wow.
I mean, it's designed around that, so everything tops out at 10 levels in a particular class, but it's where you get a lot of the backstory and lore of the world itself, not the specific story that's going on with Malifaux. And a lot of stuff you see in bestiaries will eventually make their way to the tabletop. So there's always that little bit of, when we get the next book, what has come from the bestiary and is now in the game. Like this lovely mecha dragon thing called the Clipper. It's been in the Guild Bestiary for 4 years. There's also the other side, which is the army scale game that's the wars and conflicts taking place Earthside. There's also lore in their books as well. If you're interested in board games, they've been plugging Vagrant Song really strongly for the past couple of years. It's sold out at Gen Con every year. It is a boss battler in the rubber hose animation style, and it takes place in like Depression era America on a ghost train. Very,
Nice.
very fluffy, great atmosphere, and I know the dev behind it, and he's a great guy. He likes aquariums. Yeah, that's the additional tie-in stuff. Vagrant Song isn't in the Malifaux universe, but I figured, like, hey, they also do board games. So, any additional questions?
I don't think there's anything for me. I really like the sound of it. I think I'm just going to finish what I'm working on at the moment. I mean, I've got a million projects I'm wanting to work on, but I'll definitely buy myself a core box for sure and hopefully get it going this year, I'd like to say.
No, I've.
You
I
great?
think,
At least,
I think-
thank you for at least giving it a try.
Yeah, no, I think I'm going to be deep diving into the lore. I find the lore really interesting, and how things go. But yeah, I've loved the models. I'm definitely interested to get back into it. Obviously, I think I spoke to you before. Unfortunately, my community, or the people who play in our area, aren't the nicest. It was very much a bit of a, you can't join us, which completely is complete opposite to what you are and what everyone else is over in America. So I've joined with the Discord now. I'm going to join your Discord as well, and I just want to start drip
thank
feeding
you.
as much of it in and start, because like your podcast as well. I was listening to that. I enjoyed that, and I'm looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know from playing before, I've got like 1,000,001 half painted models that I'm gonna probably go back to and finish and see what kind of crews I can build out.
Yeah, since we're like a relatively small game, we aren't GW and we aren't a famous IP, and we're still managing to survive in this environment. So we really, really try to clamp down on toxicity, but obviously the folks that are watching out for that aren't everywhere, and you're always going to have toxic elements to any kind of game. So, like, if you can't find someone to play with, then don't play Malifaux. I would hate to play against toxic people. Fuck those guys. But I'll be the first one to tell you, if you can't find a way to have fun with it, then don't try to force it on yourself. I'll just, when I can afford it, I'll fly out there and threaten them or whatever. I don't know.
I think it's just English people, to be honest. I think a lot of English, I mean, we're English, but we're okay. But a lot of English people are very sort of, this is mine. This is mine. You stay away. And it's like, you're in a hobby that's already not got a lot of people in and that more people want to get into. And now you're trying to stop people from getting into that as well. But there's just no need for it. But that's good. I enjoy it.
We'll take it from the beginning, so we'll inceptualize it. We'll make it happen over here. We'll start our own lot and get it going. Don't worry.
Absolutely.
So it seems really interesting. It's a different take on standard board game. I say board games, wargaming games. I like the story. I like the lore. It's just it just seems a really interesting kind of world to play in. And it's different. There's magic in it, and it's a skirmish game. And I love skirmish games. When I first looked at it, I was there, I want to go play a skirmish game. I don't need loads of models. I haven't got a lot of time. I want to be able to get into something that's quite, but obviously I didn't pick it up back then just because I think it was actually first edition. As I was looking, as we've been chatting, I think it was first edition. There's very limited stuff. And again, it's one of those things when I actually went to go get it, there wasn't much to get hold of over here. But it is now more over here. Wayland Games, like you say, you can get it. And I think, I think I'd like to have a go at it. I mean, definitely building the models was an experience. I'll tell you that, though. But knowing now, I don't need to build every single one of them. I know I don't. It's at least I can research that and understand it a bit better. Because those frontier men, they were hard.
You don't get the Pathfinder box. The Pathfinder himself is okay, but he comes with robotic bear traps that have a lot of spindly metal tentacles on them. That was not terribly fun to put together, but also use whatever you want for the models. If you don't want to put together and find something else, I'm not going to care. The problem, one thing, thank you guys for being here, by the way. We're slowly wrapping this up. Thank you for allowing me to ramble for 2 fucking hours. You're welcome. I will always give you a mile worth of answer for a 1-inch question. One of the things that I'm glad we're doing this online so you can look at stuff up because that makes it a lot easier to point things out. My own personal problem is that I really like basic humans. I like playing basic dudes, and so it's really hard to like sell people on like some of the fantastical elements and the different aesthetics of this game while I'm just doing miners and reporters and literally just capitalists. But if you like the little bits of silly stuff you can get out of just your average Joe, it's great. Like I've got this guy, he's just called a false witness. He's just a dude pretending to cry and blaming someone, and he's one of the most annoying pieces in the game because he can put up a bubble that prevents everyone from cheating. So usually he's like a huge target immediately. Yeah, I could go on for hours about the different aesthetics and characters I like, characters I hate. If you want a list of evil dudes, I can give you a list of evil dudes.
I was going to say, one thing I'd like to do, if you were potentially interested in doing it, I'd like to build a warband with you, or I'd like to go through I'd like to do this. What's the way I want to go around doing it? How, I like to look at these guys, like to look at these guys. These are the keywords, because I don't know what the keywords really mean yet. I don't understand that, and I think that's like a whole thing in itself, because I'm like, right, I'm interested in this. My kind of play style in just games is X. I like to look at it and then kind of talk me and walk me through one, like, if you'd be keen to, because I'd love to do something like that, and then build it with you, and then show my progress in doing it, or my lack of progress, or me screaming at parts and throwing them across the room. But I'd like to do that, I'd like if that's something you'd be interested in.
Absolutely. I will always jump at the chance to talk about this game. And having someone with a focus on what they want makes it a lot easier. Because again, it's complex, so there's just a ton of shit. We can only talk about so much in 2 hours, but really can latch on to if I like this kind of aesthetic or this kind of play style, and where to begin with that. Makes it a lot easier for me. Also, I think this was pretty informative. I think gave you guys a good amount of information, and then I'm sure my listeners will enjoy me just getting to talk for a long time. Oh, that's the other thing. Don't start listening to me right away. It's counterintuitive because a bigger audience is nice, but I am like 90% humor, and 90% of that 90% humor is in jokes that you're not going to get unless you have some understanding of the game.
Yeah.
I think most people tell me I'm funny, but you're going to have to understand the game a bit before you understand the funny.
Yeah.
So go to those other content creators I mentioned. They're good people. They'll get you started. And
Awesome.
Once you are wanting the memes, you'll come back to me. Yeah, I could probably start posting shit out of context on TikTok. That'll be fun.
Yeah. Perfect. No, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we can definitely wrap this up. Thank you guys for
Awesome.
being with me. Thank you, Seb. Yeah, there we go.
No problem.
Thank you, Chad.
Thank you.
And thank you, Steve.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure. You've opened my eyes a bit more to it, and I'm looking forward to it now. So.
I'm deeply sorry for interrupting you so much.
It's just the lag, isn't it? That's the problem.
It's the lag. It's not you. The amount of times you were saying something, and then I started kind of, as you were saying it, I was like, right, he's coming to the end of the sentence. I'm going to start talking as he's stopping the sentence. Hopefully, I'll get there in time. And then sometimes I didn't, and then I was just like, it was just awful. It's very British. It was no you.
no, you first. You first.
No.
Okay, I'll let you guys go. So we can wrap this up. I have been your host, Douglas Scoundrels. Thank you guys again for being with me, and thank you, listeners. And as I always say, well, you guys know this, fun is always king. Enjoy whatever games you play. Thank you for giving us a shot. Good night. You can say goodbye, guys.
Oh, goodbye.
Cheers,
Goodbye.
thank you. Thanks for listening.
I was just waving.
Songs used in this production are Villainous Treachery and 5-Card Shuffle. All music is created by Kevin MacLeod and is licensed under Creative Commons.